Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at the second half of the Donruss Studio cards for the 1990s, which is 1996 through 1998. And 3 out of 8 doesn't really look like the second half of the run of cards, except in the way that Donruss Studio worked, it really kind of was. When they came up with the idea for Studio, it was a basic idea, and they kind of played around with it for a while, never quite landing on what would work down the road, because when you do something, what do you do the next year? Same thing? It doesn't really work that well. So for the first 2 years, they used one approach, then they used another approach for 2 years, and then they used another approach for 1 year. And then they came up with an approach in 1996, and they were able to just kind of modify that for the next 2 years. And then by 98, they kind of ran out of steam. But the sets from 96 through 98 do share a lot in common. So that's why we're looking at them together, and it's just kind of the logical place. So by the end of the decade, or by the end of the run of Studio, they finally settled on what would work for Studio, which is why I say that it's basically the second half of the history of Studio. And when the problem with the 1995 set, the reason it only lasted 1 year was because they lost the whole idea of Studio. 95 was all about parallels, as in literally that was it. Studio, that just didn't have a place in these cards. And the cards didn't have a place in the hobby. So they had to do a hard reboot, but they kind of did a reset going back to the first 2 years for the 1996 design. So the 96 design, like the 92 design, has 2 images, a portrait and an action shot, but more like the 91 set, the portrait is the whole point of the card. And then it does have a little action shot on the side, which is kind of cool. It has some nice silver foil on it. And yeah, that's basically all they needed for the card, but that's the point. That's all they needed for the card. They just made a really nice card that emphasizes portrait. How hard is that? And then the card back has a very mid-90s look that works really well, with a really strong theme on the back of the Studio logo. Specifically that big O up at the top, which, yeah, we'll be spending some time looking at it. So, the 96 set was really designed to feature parallels. That was the key to it. And so they did 3 parallels for the set. They were all called artist proof. The artist proof is basically the silver foil is holofoil. Different colors of holofoil. So the base level is copper or bronze. And the reason I distinguish between the two is because on the front, the very strong orange color of the holofoil is very much a copper color. But on the back, it's really more of a bronze color. And you might notice that O up at the top, it says 1 of 2000. So these cards have a print run of 2000. They're not individually serial numbered, but they do have a limited print run. When you go over to the next tier, which is gold holofoil, here they have succeeded with the gold on the front and as well as on the back. And you'll notice that in the case of these, they're individually, well, they're not individually numbered, but they are 1 of 500. That's the distinction. And then when you go on to the silver holofoil or platinum holofoil or whatever you want to look at it as, in the case of this, these are actually kind of tricky to tell the difference between this and the regular silver. So the artist proof, you gotta look at the back and see that it says 1 of 100. That's how you tell the difference. So you gotta see the back in order to know whether it is. But those were the 3 parallels, and that was what the whole set was built around. So every single player had 4 cards between the base and the parallels. The set did have some inserts, so that was the other counterpoint, which strangely 95 decided they didn't need to do. Well, thankfully they figured out that they absolutely did need to do it. And the first insert set is called Hit Parade. This is designed around the theme of records. So the card is a square shape, just like a record jacket, and the design is around it, but they also have a record coming out of the jacket on the side. And because records are always smaller than the record jacket, they have to be to go inside, the die cutting is actually indented so that the record is a little bit smaller than the rest of the card. And some nice holofoil on the front, and the cards are all serial numbered out of 5,000. And on top of that, I really love the fact that on the record, on the front, the record says side 1, and on the other side, it says side 2. I love that they threw that onto the card. So not so that you know which side's the front and the back, I just thought it was really kind of cool. So they had that insert. Then they had an insert set called Master Strokes, and this is one they would do all the way through. Master Strokes is a canvas front card. I don't know if it's actual canvas or if it's just created in order to feel like canvas, but it has the whole canvas texture on the front. Really cool. Even the silver foil on the card front is textured into it, so it just looks great. And I love the brushstroke effect that they have so that it really does carry like a work of art. Just really cool. And on the card back, these are all individually serial numbered out of 5,000. But I must note, they did also release a whole bunch of samples or promos of these cards as well. Like literally the whole set is done both as the regular release and as a promo. And the promo cards all say sample on the back, and then they say promo/5000. That's the back, but the front's identical. So there are basically parallels of all these cards. And then the last insert set they had was called Stained Glass. And Stained Glass is an acetate card that they kind of play around with it. So part of the card is sort of see-through and the other part is not see-through, but it's kind of intermixed. So the glass itself has the whole stained glass effect where the light comes through, but the logo also does it as well, which is just a really cool thing about this card. So that was 1996. They didn't do too much that was crazy. They just did straightforward cards with straightforward parallels and some straightforward inserts. And that's, other than the promos, that's it. Now, in 1997, they went even more toward mimicking the first year of Studio. They wanted to emphasize the whole idea of portraits, as in they really wanted to emphasize portraits. And so the cards themselves are designed with just a regular, straightforward portrait. The rest of the card is just a backdrop to kind of get out of the way. A nice two-tone gray affected card with 2 stripes down the side, a little bit of silver foil on the card for the player name and the logo. And that's it. That's all they needed to do. And that was for 2 reasons. One, that's how you make the portrait look good. The other reason is actually it sets you up for some pretty cool parallels. And the parallels are still artist proof, but there are only 2. The first one is the silver holofoil or the silver artist proof. And in this case, they just have the bands on the side, which have holofoil, but they have a 2-phase holofoil with kind of a candy cane striping for the pattern on either side. And then of course, all of the silver foil inside the card turns into a silver holofoil. And these cards, as I recall, there was a print run of 1,000. I'm drawing a blank here, but I think it's 1,000. And then they also had their gold holofoil, and in this case, all the silver holofoil, well, it gets replaced by gold holofoil in all the same ways, but also the background, instead of being a 2-tone silver, is now a 2-tone gold, as well as gold down at the bottom. So this card really has a wonderful, rich look to it. And this has a print run of 200 or 300. It's pretty low. I really am drawing a blank. Not sure why. Well, I'll probably write in the description below. At any rate, it's still pretty uncommon. And then the whole thing about portraits, they put a big emphasis into portraits to the point where in 1997, these cards were not released in regular packs. They were actually released in oversized packs, really big ones. And the reason for that was that they also released not really jumbo cards, they're 8x10s. That's the size, which is kind of the universal autograph size for portraits. And so they designed it with those portraits. I mean, after all, Pacific was doing box toppers and they had their Pacific Gridiron cards for 2 years. It had been a while since Donruss had really done a whole lot with box toppers, so it was time. And so here they made full-blown 8x10s in every single pack. So every pack had one 8x10 and it had a small pack of the regular size cards. That's just the way the packs came. So for them, the jumbo cards, the 8x10s, were just standard. It was a standalone set, but it's a parallel, a non-numerically even parallel of star players in the set. So a smaller set, renumbered. These cards are identical to the small size cards. These cards, they'll really show you just how great the images are for the cards. They look fantastic. And they did not do a parallel of these cards. It was just the base level. So they showed up at kind of a similar rate to the regular cards in the set. Not quite, but close. And yeah, so moving on to the inserts. The first insert set they had was called Hard Hats. This is also an acetate card. This is also die cut, but here the whole theme is around a batting helmet. And so that's the way that the card is designed. And not a lot else to say. It's individually serial numbered out of 5,000, and yeah, there you go. They also redid their Master Strokes set, and here this card, again, canvas surface. The design theme for the card is designed more around art, where it kind of fades into an unfinished edge to the canvas. Looks really nice. But these cards, they're numbered out of 2,000. So yeah, quite a bit more rare. But I mentioned that the jumbo cards had no parallels, but they did have an insert set, which was, well, Master Strokes. And the bigger Master Strokes are not the canvas surface, but they're also serial numbered out of 5,000, which means that the jumbo size, or the 8x10 size of the Master Strokes, that's actually the more common. So it's almost like that's the regular insert set, and then the parallel insert set is the smaller regular size ones in packs. Regardless, there you go. So for 1998, now you've got everything set up. They figured out part of it in 1996. They refined it in 97. So in 1998, once again, you were opening packs that were big packs that had one 8x10 in it, and then it had a smaller pack of regular size cards. And the design for 1998 is, this should be the nicest card. I think 97 is a little bit better. But 98, I think the overall design inside is gorgeous. Love the team color on it. But that big white border around the outside is what kills it. And if it didn't have that, I think this card would probably be the best of the studio designs. But because it has the white border, you're kind of limited. But the white border is there because, well, they got parallels and they wanted to have a way to emphasize it. And so, once again, they're artist-proof cards. And for these parallels, the border is all the way around the outside. Silver hollow foil, obviously, for the most basic. And in this case, they have more texturing going on in it, which makes the parallel more lively. It's a more dynamic parallel, the way it reads across. Really kind of cool. And then when you go over to the gold parallel, here the gold parallel is a lot stronger. Even though it doesn't have the consistency across the entire card, just the way that whole big border really comes out and all the pieces inside work is a lot stronger. But the gold parallels on the back, you might notice they're actually individually serial numbered out of 300. So now for the base cards in the parallels, they're finally serial numbered here in the final year that they were doing it. And then they, obviously, once again, they did the oversized cards. They did the 8x10 cards. All of these cards are done the same way as the previous year. Now, in this case, the band around the outside is a little bit thinner. And that actually becomes significant because in 1998, they also did a parallel of the jumbo cards with the gold foil parallel, also serial numbered out of 300. So they did it both at the basic level and at the jumbo level. And the way that you can tell the jumbo level is that the band around the outside is a lot thinner. But other than that, that's what we did for that's not everything that they did for the jumbos, because they also did autographs. Now, everything I say about 98 applies to 97 as well. Because in 97, they did three cards they did inserted, they did autographed, and then in 1998, there were 3 cards they did autographed. These are the same approach for the jumbos. It's just that they have an autograph on it, but they also have a silver logo that is printed into it as a seal of authenticity. And so that's how you can tell the authentic autographs from the personal autographs. And you might notice that the Travis Lee card here that I have says sample on the back. Well, I don't know the history of it, but these cards are valid and they're pretty common. So you can, for the most part, you can get all these without the sample, but at least with Travis Lee, you can also get it with a sample, which is kind of an interesting card to run into. And it's the one you're most likely to see. And then before we move on to the actual inserts, I do want to mention that in the main set, they also have the checklist cards also have players on the front. So unique thing for 1998. Well, sort of unique. They were getting back around to it, basically. So for the inserts, the first insert set they have is called Freeze Frame. And this card is a mirror finished surface. The whole theme of the card is around film stock. So it's got kind of the angle, and you can see the tractor, the treads in the film stock, and yeah, not a lot to it. These are individually serial numbered out of 4,500. Sort of. These cards actually are only numbered 501 through 4,500 out of 4,500. The first 100, 1 through 500, are die cut. So they have the angles at either side, and then all of the tractor feed, the punches, are, well, they're punched out. So this card is one, Donruss had already started to do this by 1998. Well, by 97 they'd started to do it, where the first portion or the last portion is done differently from the rest. And in this case, it's die cut. So the whole set is done that way. So that means there are 4,000 of the regular, and then there are 500 of the special die cut. The second insert set they did is called Hit Parade, which is, you know, a bunch of hitters. This card is kind of a mess because it's mostly kind of a mirror or chrome finish, but it also has some brushed metal. It's kind of a card that wants to be something but doesn't know what it's going to ultimately be. So it's just kind of there, and it's individually serial numbered out of 5,000. The last insert set is Master Strokes. Pretty logically. Again, it has a canvas surface over the front. It uses gold foil instead of silver foil for this card design, and I like the way that the art approach is done for it. These cards do not have 8x10 versions though, so they only did that for the 1 year. These cards are, however, individually serial numbered out of 1,000. So these are really uncommon for inserts for Donruss Studio. And that's it. That's all there is to say about Donruss Studio in 1998, with one exception. In 98, Donruss did a deal with PlayStation, and so there was a contest for PlayStation, and the contest cards were put into various Donruss packs, specifically 2 releases. One of those releases was Donruss Studio. So you would get these cards, the various players. It's basically a set with no numbers, and you can get them here in this pack, and you can also get them in another kind of pack. So you might run into those. But that is it. That does bring Studio to a close for the 90s. It would be brought up in the early 2000s, and it would be a set that very much fit with the early 2000s. So it would not be a Studio set. It would be a set that was just called Studio. But regardless, it was a pretty cool set in the early 2000s. I'll get around to that at some point. I'll talk about that later. But here, this is the second half of the story of the 90s Donruss Studio card tradition. So, if you have anything to mention about this, because I do know of one card that I don't understand, and I really wish I could have talked about it, but I don't know anything about it. So, if you do have any additional insight into these cards, please, by all means, let me know. If you haven't seen the previous video, the 91 through 95 video, do definitely check that out. Subscribe if you haven't done so already, and thank you very much for watching.